And we're delighted to say that we're joined in the studio now by the now former Meath manager, Andy McENTee. Good morning to you, Andy.
Morning, lads. Yeah.
Still feel a bit weird, the former Meath manager?
Yeah, that's the first time I've heard it, really, you know. I've read it often enough, but that's the first time I've heard it. So, yeah, look at it. I mean, it is what it is.
You get attached to the role, obviously, over 6 years and the intensity of it almost.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you get... look at, I mean, the title itself, it doesn't mean a whole pile, but, I mean, it's you know, it takes over your life, I suppose, for 6 years, and before you know it, 6 years are over. So I mean, it seems like a relatively short time, but it's been eventful enough, I'm sure.
What were the main emotions during the week since you've announced it?
I mean, you know, to be perfectly honest, I think, you know, this was my second term. It was the third year of my second term, so it was a natural ending, really. I think most managerial stints have a natural ending, and it probably was. It was coming to that, really. Did
you kind of know that this year, or did you think if we could put a bit of a run together here, we could reinvigorate this thing, or had you it in your head that it probably would be the last year anyway?
I didn't, you know, I hadn't put much thought into it. I mean, I think the episode before Christmas, you know, probably made that a little bit evident that this was going to be probably the last. And I think that had an impact. Unfortunately, I think that had an impact probably on everybody,
including the players. Yeah,
I think so. I think it came out of the blue, really. You know, we were due to have another year there. It didn't. We weren't expecting it. I don't think the players expected it. I think it undermined a little bit of confidence in the players themselves, and in the players' confidence in us, and it just didn't help.
It feels like a bit of a time since that actually happened. Like, so from your own perspective, like, what happened?
Well, there was I suppose there was a small group of people within the Meath County Board who felt it was time for change, and unfortunately, I think, you know, they went about it the wrong way. I think a lot of people, maybe, I'm not sure what their agenda was or what their best intentions was. And unfortunately, I don't feel it was in the best interest of Meath football. But you look at, you know, that's. I don't want to really dwell too much on it, apart from the fact to say that it certainly didn't help the situation.
2021 was that weird COVID dictated league. Obviously everything was sort of out of kilter, wasn't it, in terms of the usual expectations of what you might have of a typical season. But just to refresh people, so the Division 2 North, you'd wins over Westmeath and Down, you go on to lose to Mayo, and then by a goal to Kildare in the semis. And Leinster goes alright, like pretty good win over Longford, lose by 1-3 to Dublin. Absolutely no shame in that. That's plenty of teams would bite your hand off for that, and that the fight back, particularly in the second half. I'm just trying to create the context in the lead into all of that, just to remind people where that was at, and also, by the way, like maybe as good a test as Dublin had in the previous 10 years, and that was it because of the reduced format. That was the end of the year. There was no more backdoor aspect to it, and that was July the 18th. What happened then between that and was the first week of October when the county board stuff came out?
Nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing that I was aware of. I mean, I remember I got a phone call from a brother of mine just to ask me, was I actually ratified? And I was under the assumption that I had been, and I spoke to someone at the county board, and they said, well, you know, it's happening this week. It's only a matter of form. And there was something going on in the background, obviously, and you know, the county board, I think a lot of the guys there were caught unawares. So
were you 2 years into your second 3-year term?
Yeah.
And typically that's what would happen. You'd get to the end of the year, they'd say, we just have to have this meeting, we'll ratify it there, and then on we go.
You have your review, you have your annual review. I had that. You know, we spoke. I mean, as far as I was concerned, that was done deal. Let's get ready for and we were in the middle of preparing, you know, for the year ahead.
They'd carried out a review into 2021. Was that an exceptional review, or was that just the usual?
Yeah, it was standard enough. You know, we would have had a review every year, so I mean, standard enough.
What does that involve? Is it like, do you sit down with them? Like, do you sit down with them and set? I'm not familiar with the GA management piece. Obviously, when you're soccer manager or rugby, they obviously sit down, they go, right, here are the targets for the year, and we either meet them or we don't, and we decide where we go. Is it the same sort of thing, or how do you?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's standard enough. You sat down, where do you feel, we could be doing better? You know, how did, you go through various aspects of management, how did that go for you? How can we improve things? What are your targets for next year? Where did we fall down last year? Usual.
Are they setting out like, here's the expectation, here's what success looks like this year, or is it as detailed as that from their side?
No, not necessarily. No, but I mean, it was very clear. Everybody had their targets. We've had our targets all along, and that was to be as competitive as possible, and hopefully come out of Leinster, and that's been our target from the word go. So that hadn't changed.
Did you get a sense during that review that there was kind of choppy waters coming in a few months' time?
No, absolutely not. No.
Like almost reassurance by the sounds of things. That.
Well, I mean, it certainly, we went through that, and I had spoken with the chairman on numerous occasions, and the first I had heard of it was that phone call that I got, and the first he had heard of it was the phone call I made to him. So there was, I don't. This is probably going on long enough now, lads.
No, yeah. Look, we can absolutely move on, and there's loads of stuff to talk about. I do think that like it does speak to the behaviours of a lot of county boards. I don't think Meath is necessarily that unique in that way, and like there's a bigger question about how well served county teams are by sports, the administration of the county team, and I suppose that's probably the reason that it's interesting to us to.
Sure, yeah, I get that. I mean, look, I would have to say that, look, I've been very well supported by the number of county chairmen that I've worked under.
Yeah.
From Conor Tormey to Peter O'Halloran, John Kavanagh. I think they were caught on a little bit unawares, and I'd be suspicious of some of the motives behind some of the people. I mean, that's that brought this about. I mean, I definitely wouldn't feel that it was in the best interests of Meath football.
And the clubs didn't feel that obviously either.
No, and that was the clubs were, pretty much it was a pretty pretty good vote of confidence from the clubs.
Did you come close to just saying, I'm out?
Very close.
At that time.
Very close, yeah. And we would have, we as a management team and as a backroom team, we got together. And I suppose one of the key issues at the time was the timing of all of this.
Yeah, late in the year.
It was late in the year. Had we decided to say, okay, well, we haven't got the backing of the county board, it's time for us to move on, it would have left the players in a pretty poor position. And that was a big enough I suppose factor in us deciding to stay on.
What's interesting around that, and I guess this kind of goes for all these sorts of stories, is that there's almost a vacuum of information sometimes, and I'd imagine that in that vacuum comes all sorts of talk here and there, and this prevails all the way through this year, where I guess conversations are happening around your own position in the public, online, all that sort of stuff. Did you ever feel those external conversations happening, or feel like that there was a cloud over the whole thing coming into this year then?
I think there probably was, yeah. I think that was, that had a big influence on a lot of the talk around, a lot of the narrative around it. It certainly didn't help. And as I say, our only concern really was the players. And players being human, they would have got a sniff that this is probably, my last year. And that changes things. You see it in... They don't mean. I don't think players mean anything by it. I think it's just human nature. You see it in other sports. When they know a manager is moving on, things change, and it's hard. It's hard to get over that. And as a management team, I'd have to say we weren't able to manage that properly to kind of get everyone to ignore the narrative that was going on around.
Would you change anything if you had your time back, knowing what you now know?
Oh, look at, I mean, if my aunt had,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think if that whole episode had happened earlier, I'd say our decision might have been different to stay with it.
As in you would have gone?
I'd say
Yeah.
that's a possibility. Yeah.
Do you when you're talking about the group, and we will move on, there's other stuff to talk about, but it is interesting to us. But when you talk about the group and how hard it is to get them, like the Ralph Rangnick stuff, obviously has been going on in Man United over the last one. There's plenty of other examples. Is it hard? Do you just address that openly and go, listen, we all know where we are. We're going to give it a push for the year, and on we go, or is it almost counterproductive to address it in that way, because at that point you're like, they are absolutely going to check out if they know for sure that is the last year. How do you tackle that?
Yeah, look, I mean, these guys have been a great group to work with. Really, they have. Very open. We've been very open about everything that's going on. So nobody was hiding behind anything here. We all knew, and I'm not saying this. The truth of the matter is, we didn't come up with the performances this year. And I'm not saying that's the only reason. I'd say it was a factor. There was a number of other factors really involved. We certainly, everybody was aware.
Yeah. Do you go into the dressing room after the Clare game, or how do you, I think was it Monday you announced that you were leaving? Do you go into the dressing room afterwards and tell them, listen, it's been great and I'm out of here, or how did you tackle that one?
Well, I didn't want to. It was an emotional enough dressing room, to be perfectly honest. Afterwards, I've battled. There's a good few guys in there that I was with in the minor scene since 2012. So it's you get very close to a lot of these guys. It wasn't. I didn't think it was the place to say it. I said nothing. We went back to the hotel, and I suppose unfortunately, there was a few people around that I didn't really want to be talking in front of to the group in front of. So I left it then. I mentioned it to the guys on the bus on the way home.
Yeah. Anybody you speak to about your tenure there was much more about it wasn't just about managing a Gaelic football team, that you were much more invested in the player, the individual, the progress off the pitch as much as anything else almost. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we've tried to look after the players as much as we possibly can, and it's great to see guys progressing as people and as men, as opposed to just footballers. So, and I think we've done a pretty good job on that. I mean, one of the things that I'd be happiest with really are the people that I've surrounded the team with. From medical team to training staff to mind coaches, stuff like that, professional coaches, football coaches, Colin Nally, all the guys the selectors that have worked with me. I'd be very happy with my choice of the team, around the team.
Has it surprised you? Did it surprise you, the level of work that had to go into it?
Not really, no. I mean, it is. The truth of the matter is, I think the nature of the beast you're talking about here. I mean, I just it's all encompassing. It takes over. I mean, there's somebody asked me, would you go through a day without thinking about football? I said, definitely not. Would you go through an hour? I don't think so.
Right. You'd be upset. Like, is that about? That's about every part of it, is it? It's not just about how do we get the tactics right. It's like,
oh yeah, I mean, there's so much involved. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, guys are trying to juggle an awful lot of things: college, work, relationships. There's an awful lot of things that you're trying to deal with.
Are you a tactician or are you a man manager?
I'd like to think a little bit of both, but I suppose, I mean, I would think my relationship with players is probably I would like to think. They might say different.
What does that look like? Is it giving them a buzz in the middle of the week to see how they're getting on? Is it catching them after training, or how close would you be to those players?
Oh, it's a combination of all of that, really. And it's meeting fellas for coffee every now and again. A lot of phone calls, a lot of one-on-ones, smaller groups. Trying to help fellas with college life, with interviews, with bits and pieces. So,
at what point did you feel that the group was in the palm of your hand the most? Would it be fair to say like the summer of 2019 or maybe 2020? I guess maybe that last Super 8 summer when Meath were in it. Is that when things were going best for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think qualifying for the Super 8s was great. that league before, when we went from Division 2 up to Division 1, there was some really good performances. Not that we didn't win them all. We lost a very close one to Donegal up in Ballybuffet at the start of the year, on a very frosty night, and we conceded a late goal to lose by a point, I think it was. And then we kind of responded really well. We had a great win against Kildare and Navan, a last minute penalty. Barry Dara scored a last minute penalty, and that's when it really started to build, I think, really.
And that building, that progress, how hard is it, I guess, given the geography of Meath, and like being blunt about it, given the fact that yourselves in Kildare, regardless of how much progress you guys make during the league, beating Dublin or coming up against Dublin is something that you guys will have to do pretty much every year if you're going to be one of the best teams in Leinster. And how much of a possibility is that game there to give you just a bit of a knockback every single year?
Yeah, look, I mean, you're coming up against, what was the best team in the history of the GAA, or the most successful team in football history. So coming up against that every year is a setback. And I suppose the last 2 years, when you get beaten and there's nothing else after that, it means you're away from the lads for another 6 months or 5 months or whatever it is. And that's a challenge, when you're trying to close a gap on someone like Dublin, who are going longer together every year, consistently every year. It's a big challenge.
And it feels as if the challenge almost gets greater year after year. The more games they win, the harder it is for you to knock them off their perch. Was that the feeling this year, that maybe we're as far away as we've ever been from Dublin?
Yeah, this year was disappointing, but I suppose the form line going into it was suggesting we didn't really play well this year. Apart from we had a good performance against Cork in the league, we had a good performance against Derry in the league, and outside of that we've got a few results, but we kind of scraped through a little bit. Wicklow was okay, but probably only okay. So going into the Dublin game, I suppose the narrative going around was that Dublin were on the slide and stuff like that, which I never really bought on in the first place. But ultimately, we didn't play well enough. We weren't good enough, and that was hard to get over.
It's really easy for us to sit here and say that people need to believe that they can beat Dublin in order to beat Dublin. But as somebody who's actually managed against them and played them most years in your tenure, does that belief take a bit of a hit after a period of time?
It does if you have performances. I mean, you don't have to be off by much, against Dublin. If you have an off day, you're going to get punished, and punished severely. Like we had a really good performance in the league in Parnell Park against them, with a lot of newcomers on the team, and it gave everybody a huge boost to performance. But then we turn around in the championship, and it's a different, playing in Croke Park is just a different, it's a different experience. It's a different game. The pace of the game is totally different. So when you come up against them, and as if you're not fully at it, you're going to get punished very badly.
You were with the Longford manager on last week, and he was talking about the order of preference of competitions. He was like, the league is number one, Tailteann Cup for them after that. It's almost felt like he was saying sort of the O'Byrne Cup was nearly ahead of the Leinster Championship in terms of relevance for them, because Leinster was just not a factor for them. You're at a different level to Longford, but what's your thoughts on that same point? Is Leinster fit for purpose? Should we scrap all of that and start afresh? What do you think?
Well, I don't think it's just Leinster's not fit for purpose. I think the provincial system is broken. I mean, you look at the amount of games that even just purely the amount of games that's played in Leinster and Ulster, compare that to Connacht and Munster, it just doesn't make sense. If you brought an outsider in and you said, well, there's 32 counties, all right, London, New York, you can include them, but 32 counties, and there's 4 groups, and there's 5 in one, and there's 11 in the other, and the reward for winning one is the same as the reward for winning the other. It just doesn't make sense. I've always been of the opinion there's a natural enough system there. You take divisions 1 and 2 and you make groups of that. Everybody gets their games, and you have a senior and you have an intermediate.
And everybody just signs up to that. Did you sit down to, I presume you sit down as a group at the start of the year and say, this is our targets for the year? And I mean the management and the players specifically.
Oh yeah, I mean we'd have certain targets. I mean, and the targets have always been,
Would winning Leinster be one?
Sure, yeah, it was. Yeah.
And discussed as because like you said yourself, Dublin probably the greatest team of all time.
Yeah.
In the middle of that, when you're sitting down having that conversation, it's a genuine, we want to win Leinster. Was it number one target? Was it?
Yeah, well, the first number of years, the thing that we really concentrated on was getting into Division 1.
Right.
And then you take it from there. But I think the last 2 years, we would. I think it's fair to say that we would have said, okay, Division 2 is fine.
Right.
I mean, it's very competitive. You get great games. We knew what it was like to be in Division 1, and unless you're, again, a bit like the Dublin thing, unless you're right at it from the word go in Division 1, you just get used to losing. And we had a year there where we had some great games, but we ultimately lost every one bar one, the last one against Monaghan. Great occasions, great competition, but we weren't strong enough to finish out games. Those last 10-15 minutes, strength and depth wasn't what other counties had, and we ended up losing a lot of games in those last 10 or 15 minutes. So being in, my attitude certainly changed from being in Division 1 wasn't.
Really?
It wasn't all.
You're better off winning a few games in Division 2.
Oh, I think so.
Right.
Yeah, because winning's a habit, but so is losing. Yeah. So,
even the exposure to the better teams and how that bring you on as a group. Ultimately, if you're getting beaten, then it's a bit of a waste of time.
I wouldn't say it's a waste of time. I mean, you get your eyes open as to where you need to be at. But I mean, you get every bit as competitive games. For us at the stage of development that we were at, you get every bit as competitive games in Division 2.
When did the abuse start? Shane has obviously been tweeting about it during the week, and it's even, I see on the back page of the paper today, Meath hit out at abuse of McENTEE and squad, and the county board did a statement out about it yesterday.
Yeah, look, I'm not a social media man. That's been there from the off.
Has it?
It has.
Social media side.
Yeah. But I mean, the likes of these people who get involved in social media are looking for a platform, are looking for a bit of airtime, and I suggest we don't waste airtime talking about them.
One question I do want to ask, we just put Shane's tweet up. He said, because Eamon Fitzmaurice had written about it a few years ago, about letters he used to get to the house. Did you get letters?
Yeah.
Like, what was the nature of them?
Well, they weren't very nice. They were, and the people that sent the letters don't even have the balls to write their name to it.
Anonymous.
Yeah.
Always.
Oh yeah.
When was the first one that you got?
Oh, I think it was probably in year 1.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you stop opening them after a while, or are you?
No, you get to know the writing. You get to know the handwriting.
Same people, sort of. Is that right?
Yeah.
What sort of stuff are they saying?
I mean, the first one started with, Ballyboden was a fluke. I don't know how you managed that, and a lot of it referred to, Shane picking Shane being part of the team, which is totally unfair, and it's a way of getting at me more than Shane, I'm sure. But
was it stuff that you needed to go to the guards about, or?
I don't think so. No. Again, as I say, you look at, and I don't look at too many tweets or you look at what's been written, how it's been written, and you kind of say, well, who's writing this? And, how much weight are you going to put in somebody's opinion like that? And I suppose that's the thing that I never really get about social media. I mean, you have people who are looking for a little bit of attention, and probably never been asked for their opinion before, and all of a sudden they have a platform. So hence my reluctance really to give them that platform.
I think maybe Eamon Fitzmaurice as well would have made a point at the time that there was maybe abuse directed at the player as well at that point. It was only ever you in that Meath setup who received letters, was it? There was nobody else in the setup or anybody else with a
Not
concern?
that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of. No.
When you're recognising the handwriting, so you see it on the envelope, did you get to a point where you're just like, bin, or are you?
Well, you certainly want to get to it before my wife gets to it.
Yeah.
And that. I mean, I can deal with the likes of that, but when it starts impacting on your family, it's kind of hard to take.
Was it abusive or was it threatening or both?
Abusive more than threatening.
Right.
Yeah.
It does have an impact on the family and on you, no matter how much you try to shut it out, doesn't it? When it's literally landing in your letterbox.
Sure. Yeah. I'd be genuinely more concerned about, Shane is the guy's out there. He's the guy. More concerned about the people around me than, ultimately I've put them in this situation,
There's also kind of like a pressure on that as well, Andy, to kind of be the stoic figure, to be the manager, to be the fella who almost says, I can brush this off. But I'd imagine as well, they're just not nice things to read. You don't want to be receiving them at the same time, as much as you have to feel I'm the manager and I'm kind of the elder statesman of this dressing room, almost, with those young lads in the dressing room, that I'd say you can kind of quickly brush that sort of stuff off without considering what it's actually doing to you and how you feel about it as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably safest to brush it off if you stop and think about it too much. Nobody likes to read, abusive things being said about them. One of the reasons I would have stopped, looking at any sort of social media, I don't go on there, and it's safer for me. I'm protecting myself as much as anything else there on that one.
Do you think that the expectations of the public towards the team were in line with what they should be? Do you think they have realistic expectations to Meath fans?
Oh, well, I it's something, and I didn't mention it in my statement last week. The vast majority of Meath fans are fantastic fans. We have some great supporters, and where I talk about you like this, I talk about getting letters, abusive letters. There's a man called Harry Smith he lives in Cullen. And I think he's lived there Meath man, living in Cullen for the last 50 years. And I get a letter from him before every game and after every game, talking about the game. I'm not sure what age Harry is, but he's a good age. Yeah. But if we were playing Down in the morning, he'd have a report on Down's last match from the local paper.
Way.
He'd send it on to me. Fantastic. And you come down, there's another letter from Harry. Yeah. Another lady, Anne Farley, from Meath woman living in Tullamore. She'd constantly send letters, Yeah.
A good support network there, despite the...
Fantastic. Kids, people bringing their kids along, genuine Meath supporters. And your genuine Meath supporter, I've always said it to the lads, will forgive anything, provided you give a certain type of performance. And that's what they appreciate.
You'll miss that.
Oh yeah, that's true. I mean, that day, that game I spoke about against Kildare in the league in, it must have been 19, I think it was 2019. The coldest day I've ever been on a pitch. The rain and sleet and snow was coming inside. It was a gale force wind, and the Meath people were just bananas at the end of it. So, yeah.
Will you go back into an inter-county job?
No.
Never. It's done now.
No. Who else would I manage?
And in terms of the life of an inter-county manager, is that something that you're kind of like, God, thankfully that's over in one way, and it doesn't really appeal to you again in the future?
No, look, I wouldn't say that. It's been a great experience. I got to work with some really, really good people, really, really good players. I mean, some of them we have some excellent players and a lot of really good young players coming through. So, it has been a good experience. I'll miss it. I mean, you get hooked on the likes of this, so you will miss it. But it's been, I suppose, I've gone from playing to a decent age. I played up until I was 42 with the club in Dunboyne, senior with the club in Dunboyne, and I went straight into management from then. So that's been 16 years now. So I guess my wife probably deserves a break at this stage. Although be careful what you ask.
Well, I mean, you look at Mickey Hart up the road and plenty of others.
Yeah.
You would, it's Meath or bust for you. Is that what you're saying? That you wouldn't have the same graph if you were in another county, or?
Oh, I couldn't. Well, I couldn't see it. No.
You might go back into a club at some point or another. Or?
I don't know. I mean, look at. I mean, it's
Who knows?
early.
It's very early, in fairness. Yeah.
It is early, yeah, and I've a few things that I need to probably need to do a bit of work for a change. The guys in Focus Capital would say he could do with doing a bit of work probably.
You need that leeway and a holiday, of course, as well. I'm sure at some point.
Yeah, we'll do a holiday. We're heading to Portugal end of August for a friend's wedding, so we're going to make the most of that.
Yeah, well, look, you've been really good with your time this morning. It was good to get that in. So I know sometimes it's not easy necessarily to talk about that thing, particularly when you've been in the middle of it, and you'd rather shut that chapter, I'm sure, and move on. But I do think that it's important in the context, as I said, of sports administration on the one side and how we're served by it in this country, and also in terms of the abuse. I'm sure there's plenty of managers up and down the country listening to what you've had to say this morning and taking something from it. So we appreciate that.
No, you're very welcome. Yeah.
Thanks a million for coming in.
Thanks for bringing me in, Les.